Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another CARS Reading Skills workshop as part of our Jack Westin MCAT podcast. In this episode, we are joined not just by me, Molly Kilty, but also by Usher, one of our amazing Jack Westin CARS instructors. Very excited to get into our passage today. We're going to be talking about the Jack Westin Daily Passage called Paul Cezanne. As always, we're going to go through this paragraph or this passage sentence by sentence and paragraph by paragraph and talk about what is most important that the author is sharing in these sentences and paragraphs. And essentially, how are we going to figure out what the main idea is? Because as we talk about all the time in our textbooks and our courses and our free sessions, the main idea really is your key to getting a ton of the questions correct. And no one knows that more than Usher because Usher, you are all over our CARS video solutions. Again, it's so nice to have you here. And I'm excited to read this one with you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Molly.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go ahead and hop in. So we'll do sentence one of paragraph one. And it says, Paul Cézanne's art may no longer be the overflowing source of modernity it was when it was first made, but it endures in its newness and in what can even be called its stylishness. Oh, okay. This is interesting. So first sentence, we always want to pause, make sure we understand. We're talking about Cezanne's art. Okay, that's kind of the subject of the sentence. That's what the sentence is about. But what are we saying about it? Right? We're saying essentially it's new and it's stylish. Okay, there's something about modernity. Maybe it's not as modern as it used to be, but it's still new and it's still stylish. Okay? That's what I'm grabbing out of this. Usher, have you heard of Paul Cézanne before?
No, I haven't, but my wife likes a lot of art, so she might have, but no, they're not really like a super famous person from what I know.
Yeah. And do you think we need to?
No, for just any Cars passage, I'd always, even if you know something about the topic at hand, I'd always just approach it as if, it's a blank slate. You never want to bring, your outside knowledge in, and you don't need to know any outside knowledge. The passage tells you everything you got to know to answer the question. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and think of your wife. Maybe your wife loves Cezanne and maybe she thinks, "Hey, Cezanne's the most modern artist ever, but actually he's not stylish at all. He's not new at all, right? Like, and it wouldn't matter, right? If the author says that he's new and he's stylish, then he is, right? All of your own thoughts, feelings, experiences, perspectives, preferences, all those things go straight out the window when you sit down for a CARS passage. So it's I think it's sometimes, like you said, even safer to have no idea what's going on,
Yeah,
have
yeah.
no context. Um, so Cezanne, his art seems new and it seems stylish, and that's what we want to take out of this. All right, let's take a look at our next sentence. There remains something indescribably racy and sudden for all its familiarity by now in the way his crisp blue line can separate the contour of an object from its mass. Okay, what are you talking about? Indescribably racy and sudden about a blue line. I feel like this sentence makes me question whether I understand art. um, but again, we're not expected to be able to visualize exactly what Cezanne's art looks like. We don't really have the context for this. I would say what we know about Cezanne's art is it's stylish and it's new, and I think that's close enough to what we're learning in this sentence that we should probably keep reading. Just see, hey, what are you really getting at with this? And then, yet, Cezanne himself was distrustful of all the apparent aspects of stylishness. Hmm, okay. So, a couple interesting things going on here. We've got a yet, and we have, as far as a message, a distrust of stylishness. Now, to me, that's kind of surprising. Usher, are you also surprised?
Yeah, because I mean, the first thing we started off with is this idea that it's stylish, right? Like you pointed that out. That's like you mentioned the modernity thing in the first sentence. When I was reading that, I was like, what are we even talking about? But what I could take from the sentence was the stylishness part. And then that kind of stuck with me. But now we're seeing, oh, well, he was actually distrustful of the stylishness. So that kind of, I don't know, it throws me for a loop, right? Kind of pushes you in the other direction of what you initially thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we had a good clue that we might have something surprising or counterintuitive, and that's the yet. Um, we have mentioned this a couple times on our Cars podcast that yet really functions to change gears. It could be a complete U-turn in terms of the passage argument. Sometimes we just clarify things. But I feel like this, it's kind of surprising. It's not what I would expect. If Cezanne's art is stylish, how could it also be true that he's distrustful of stylishness, right? That's definitely something that we want to keep in our mind or even map as we get to the end of the paragraph here. So he's distrustful of stylishness, yet he is stylish.
Yeah.
One last sentence here, and then we'll talk about P1. And he was unsure at bottom of where he was going as an artist. Okay, unsure at bottom. It sounds like he doesn't know where he was going. That's fine. That's not really adding anything new to the argument. To me, I'm tracking the stylish piece, right? Cezanne, his art was new and stylish, right? I'm not as worried about the modernity because it wasn't clear. And yet he was distrustful of stylishness. Anything I missed there?
I would say that that seems like a great take, Molly. I mean, yeah, I think maybe if anything, like that first sentence might have been what the author thought, and then we're kind of seeing what Cezanne. It says Cezanne himself, so maybe that's what Cezanne thought. And
Hmm.
I think that those are both two good things to track, right? Like what Cezanne himself was thinking and what the author was thinking. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because this is the author arguing that Cezanne himself thought something. He got a couple layers in here. We'll see. Maybe we'll get some direct quotes or something like that too that will really help us figure out what Cezanne believed. But yeah, the perspective is totally different. That's a great point. Um, okay, well, let's take that. That's paragraph one. Let's look at paragraph two now and see how our understanding develops. So he was on the verge of middle age when he had the crucial revelation of an artist's mission. Ooh, I feel like this is a big dot, dot, dot in my brain. It's like, okay, middle age, it's probably been a little while. I don't know how old he was at the beginning of this discussion, but on the verge of middle age, he's got a revelation of his mission. What is it? What was the revelation? Right? It's like, tell me. I'm on the edge of my seat now. Um, but I don't know what it is yet. So something's changing. Yet, what he thought, and if you're not watching, that thought is italicized. So, yet what he thought was revealed was largely inconsistent with the means he had already developed. We see another one of those yets, and it feels like there's some inconsistency, but to me, not super tangible yet. So,
Yeah, I
something
agree.
counterintuitive, right? Okay, let's keep reading. The problematic quality of his art, the source perhaps of its unfading modernity, came from the ultimate necessity of revising his intentions under the pressure of a method that evolved as if in opposition to them. Usher, we're losing. I'm losing it. What is going on?
Yeah, that is a super long sentence. And I mean, like, it's just for me, it's like when you see like I don't know, I've seen on like Instagram before, like you'll have those like random presenters that say a bunch of word gibberish to sound smart at the front of the stage. And I'm like, bro, what are you even saying, right? That's kind
Yeah.
of what this felt like to me. But I thought that it's kind of saying like, okay, his like modernness, his modernity, it kind of feel if that felt feeling came from being forced to change his goals. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. He was revising his intentions. So he's kind of like changing his goals because whatever method he thought of kind of went against them. That's sort of what I'm seeing. But even then, it's still not like I'm just trying to translate piece by piece, but I still don't even know what we're talking about. It's not really anything tangible, right? So
Yeah. The feeling that I get as I'm reading this is conflict. Like there's some element of like cognitive dissonance, like something that he's doing is not in alignment with how he's trying to do it. Or like there's something, again, kind of counterintuitive about this situation, this revelation and what he's doing. We have one more sentence. I'm hoping that clears it up. But as far as a feeling that I get when I read, even not even focusing on the actual text, which is confusing objectively, I feel some friction or some conflict or inconsistency in what's going on in this middle age revelation. Okay, last sentence, bring us home. Please clear it up. That is, he made his art seem fresh by returning to methods that were older. Oh, I don't know about you, but that first two words, that is, with the comma, whenever I see that, my heart just, it goes full Grinch and grows a couple sizes. Like, I love it.
Oh,
Because if they say that is, comma, they're about to restate what they just said and make it simpler. Like, I
yeah.
love it. Or in other words, yes, please. Or by this, I mean, yes, please. So in this case, art seems fresh by embracing older methods. And that's the conflict, right? Fresh and old, kind of, counterintuitive combination. And yet that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Sweet. So, love that. We got the clarity towards the end of the paragraph. Now we're feeling better. All right. Well, let's take a look at our third. It says he was making the first conscious attempt to save the key principle of Western painting, its concern for an ample and literal rendition of space from the effects of Impressionist color. Okay. So we're trying to save a principle of Western painting from Impressionists. It sounds like we've got Cezanne and we've got Impressionists. Western painting seems like something like current, right? It's just the idea of painting in the West, right? He's trying to save it from Impressionist color. I don't think that there's a clear presentation of an argument here, but I do see that we're introducing the idea that we have Cezanne and we have Impressionists, and Cezanne is not entirely in alignment with Impressionist color or maybe Impressionist beliefs or trends. That's all I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with you. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like he's protecting Western painting from Impressionism. Maybe there's this part where they kind of have a focus on color, but even then it just says Impressionist color. Like there's not really much more you can take than that, and I think that that sums it up perfectly.
Perfect. All right, let's keep reading here in P3. So he had noted the impressionist tendency to obscure depth. Okay, so impressionists obscure depth. This isn't directly tying back to Western painting, it's just something that he's noting. But okay, so there's something that is obscured. Depth is obscured with impressionist paintings. So let's see if we get more context. Take, for instance, his three pairs. The greens and browns blending into one another are all impressionist, but his placement of them into the picture makes it seem like a still life from centuries before. Okay, to me, this feels super familiar, right? We've got impressionist, but also it seems like it's very old, right? Kind of feels like that idea from earlier where art is seeming fresh because he's using older methods. It's like here, I don't know much about impressionism. Maybe that's current, possibly. Based on the
I don't
first
know.
sentence, maybe. But we're doing something that channels that older style of art. And that's our three pairs. All right, one last sentence here. So, like Manet, he changed the direction of painting in the very effort to return it by new paths to its old ways. Ah, I love that. So, it seems like we're continuing. right? Usher, what do you think is going on in this paragraph as a whole, if you had to sum it up?
Yeah, I think, you know, in the end, we came back to our argument that we saw in the previous paragraph, which was, he made his art kind of feel fresh by going back to the old techniques. And at first, when I read this paragraph, I was like, oh, maybe we're going to talk about Impressionists, right? You mentioned that point about obscuring death, but then the second half is like, it make it seem like a still life from centuries before, went from new paths to its old ways. I feel like if you didn't catch like us going back to the old ways from that centuries before sentence, then you can definitely get it here because it tells you directly changing the direction by new paths in an effort to return it by new paths to its old ways. So like here they're telling you directly, hey, we're using the old technique. So for me, I feel like what I would kind of track here is like that three pairs example, and then just slap paragraphs two's argument right in front of it. And I think I think you have an argument right there.
I completely agree. Yeah. And if you were following along in your mapping, um, you could even draw what we call an arrow, right? And if you're curious about how we do things like that, how we map, how you use arrows to, show that arguments um, continue throughout a passage, go actually see Usher in a free session. He's got them every week. He can walk you through the basics of mapping. But I totally agree. We're pretty much just restating paragraph two. We got an example. Let's take a look here at paragraph 4. So Cezanne was self-conscious about returning to more established methods of painting when he showed his investment in the old masters. Okay, so we're still talking about returning, or we're still kind of balancing old stuff with established methods, which are probably current. Okay, that sounds familiar. We're saying he was self-conscious about it, which I'm going to keep in mind. If they talk a lot about his, you know, um, self-consciousness, his indecision, anything like that, that might be something I want to track and map. But I feel like we have quite a few anchors in this sentence to what we had talked about previously. So I'm going to hold off and I'm going to keep reading for now. Let's see what they share with this. When he said he wanted to redo Poisson after nature and, quote, make Impressionism something solid and durable like the old masters, end quote, he meant apparently that he wanted to impose a composition and design like that of High Renaissance on the, quote, raw chromatic material provided by the Impressionist registration of visual experience. That is a long sentence. Very, very long. Um, for a student that's reading along, feel free to pause partway through if you'd like, but whatever you need to do to make sure you've given yourself a chance to understand this. So, what are we getting from this? What are the key things we want to track? What do you think?
I would say, it's basically this idea where he wanted to take, the raw, it says chromatic material. So I don't know, for me, chrome maybe represents like a color. So he wanted to take Impressionism sort of raw color and put it together with like Renaissance style, is really what I'm getting. I think that there's like, these names mentioned here, the old masters aspect. There's a lot that's going on, but um, I could think to myself, he wanted something solid and durable. So he took the color from the Impressionists and then mixed it with the Renaissance. And I feel like that's what they're probably saying,
Yeah.
from my interpretation of it.
Yeah. And it still kind of sounds like what we had talked about previously, right? Like
Yeah.
he's taking some things from Impressionism and mixing them from things or with things that are the old masters or the old methods.
Good point. Yeah. I actually didn't even think about that for a second. Yeah. It's popping up all over. So,
Yeah. And old masters sounds like the old ways, the methods that were older. They haven't officially defined it for us, but I feel like that's probably fair to assume.
yeah.
But again, we have one more sentence. Let's keep reading and see what we get. Again, it seems like we've got Impressionism and we've got the older ways, and Cezanne's kind of mixing them up. We also have a direct quote from Cezanne, which is nice too. All right, last sentence here in P4. The parts of the painting were still to be supplied by the Impressionist method, which was held to be truer than nature. Okay, or true to nature. But these were to be organized into a whole on a more traditional or on more traditional principles, whereby the painting still depicted a three-dimensional space. So it sounded like we just said we were still using impressionist methods, but we did other stuff. It feels like that's really the theme of this entire paragraph is Cezanne accepted some elements of impressionism, but made changes as well.
Yeah.
And again, we've seen this before. You take these current methods, which now we definitely can tie with impressionists, and you mix in some older takes on it, right? And that's it, in my eyes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, um, it's kind of just like what we saw in paragraph three. We're just giving an example of like how he's doing that, right? Like in paragraph three, we saw the three pairs. Here we're seeing it with, mixing it with the Renaissance, mixing it with the old ways. And specifically, I guess what he's taking from the Impressionists, like the color, 3D space aspect, or the observation and the color aspect. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's take that into our fifth paragraph. The Impressionists, as consistent in their naturalism as they knew how to be, had let nature dictate the overall design and unity of the picture, along with its component parts, refusing in theory to interfere consciously with their optical impressions. Okay, so we're defining what impressionists do now. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more into impressionists. I think a lot of this is probably more specific and detailed than we're really going to be responsible for. But what I'm tracking is we used the word nature quite a bit, right? And it seems like we're trying not to have our consciousness interfere. Like maybe we're just trying to paint the way that we see, right? We're not trying to interfere with things. Again, I don't think this sentence has a lot that we're going to be responsible for, but it's helping me understand the basics of impressionism, which I think is worth it. Because that was a hard sentence, let's see if our next sentence gives us a little bit of clarity. For all that, their pictures did not lack structure. Insofar as any single impressionist picture was successful, it achieved an appropriate and satisfying unity. Okay, I feel like this one's a little bit easier to understand, and we've got another word that showed up twice, and that's
Mm-hmm.
unity. So, between sentence one and two, which one do you think is more important to track? What should we be pulling out of these two so far?
I think I think sentence two is probably more important. I would say it's easier just because it's shorter, at least for me. But I think the most important thing is that they're basically these good impressionist paintings. In the end, they're kind of just unified and they're structured, right? So there's just like overall, yeah, I would say structure is a good word. They're unified and structured. So
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Okay, like all successful works of art, the individual parts had to clearly compose a whole. Okay, so again, we're talking about success. We're basically, in my eyes, in this paragraph, talking about what makes an impressionist piece of art successful, right?
mhm.
So successful impressionist art have something to do with unity, right? Clearly compose a whole, okay, and it's satisfying. It's a good thing, okay. If you're successful impressionist art, there's this theme of unity. Okay, again, I'm keeping in my mind that idea from this paragraph, but I'm also thinking I know Cezanne takes pieces of Impressionism and makes changes. So this is Impressionist. This isn't necessarily Cezanne. This paragraph is all about what Impressionists do. So maybe
Yeah,
our sixth paragraph will help us understand what Cezanne does. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's, I think, what the most important is to take care of from this paragraph.
absolutely agree.
Awesome. Cool. Paragraph six is super short, actually. It's only two sentences. So, committed though he was to the motif in nature in all its givenness, Cezanne still felt that nature could not, of its own accord, provide a suspicion or a sufficient basis for pictorial unity. What he wanted had to be more emphatic, more tangible in its articulation, and therefore supposedly more, in quotes here, permanent. Okay, this definitely seems more complicated, but what I'm tracking is we're back to Cezanne. Okay, we're not, nature is not enough. Okay, Cezanne wanted more than nature. Nature is impressionism. So this is probably bringing us back to Cezanne and how Cezanne mixed old ways with new ways, perhaps. That's what I'm expecting, at least. But I want to see what this next sentence says, since it's so short. Okay, pictorial unity had to be read, and that's in italics here, into nature. Okay, what are you thinking about from paragraph 6?
So I think, yeah, I totally agree with you about that first sentence. It's kind of tough to grasp. I think, it says Cezanne felt that nature could not of its own accord. So it's kind of saying like nature alone would not create strong unity. And then this sentence, we can see that read is italicized. So the unity had to be read into nature. What I'm kind of getting from that is the artist kind of has to, so Cezanne needs to sort of impose unity onto like whatever they see in nature. So they kind of have to put the unity in themselves. I guess when they're painting or, capturing a photo or whatever the case may be. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like the word read and the fact that it's italicized is interesting, especially because in the paragraph before, we were talking about how the Impressionists, who are really, the individuals that we associate with unity, were trying not to, in their words, interfere consciously, right? Like it seemed like they were really trying to focus on nature and just painting things like their optical impressions gave them. Here we're saying they had to be read into nature. And at least for me, reading, especially in italics there, sounds a little more cognitive.
Yeah.
So maybe Cezanne is pointing out like, hey, you're trying to have unity by not, you know, being cognitive about this, but you need to. Right. Again, we know from the previous paragraphs that Cezanne does something a little different from the Impressionists. So I feel like this idea that unity has to be read to me is Cezanne pointing out that maybe Impressionism alone is not enough to do what he wants to do with it. So I would probably track this last sentence as is. So unity has to be read into nature. But I want to track that this is Cezanne's belief, not Impressionism. Because again, we know he does some different things from there.
Right.
Cool. Well, we only have one last paragraph. This passage kind of flew by. Let's see what we'll get into, and then we can figure out, what is our main idea here. Okay, so like the old masters, Cezanne assumed that the elements and relations of pictorial design should be clear as those of architecture. Okay, so the elements being clear, I feel like we've kind of alluded to that before, right? Talking about he wants it to be more tangible and articulated, three-dimensional, have some depth, but specifically talking about architecture. Okay. Presumably, if you're going to build something, you want to have depth, you want to have understanding of things like that, but kind of interesting to make that comparison. When I see that relation to, it should be clear like architecture. That's kind of what I'm thinking, at least to myself.
Yeah.
Depth, you know, borders, like having clear distinctions between things. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It sounds that's it's kind of like to me, kind of like as clear as and organized as like a building. I guess like,
Yeah.
I guess when I think of architecture, it's pretty neat. So
Yeah. Like a blueprint almost.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. The eye was to be led through a rhythmically organized system of dark and light, marshaled around points of interest. Okay, this one I feel like I'm really just trying to visualize and kind of imagine what my eye is doing, but I do think the what we got from the previous sentence is going to lead us through here, right? It's, again, we
Right.
want clear distinctions between things. We want divisions like there would be in architecture or a blueprint.
Right.
in the three pairs, the one pair laying down throws its shadows on the one standing, creating a sense of vertical space. So, okay, right. Now we're seeing the three pairs come back. And again, we're showing that the three pairs brings in this depth element, right? Or this clarity that maybe is not what the Impressionists do. So that was our last sentence, right? What are we getting from this paragraph, and what do you think is going on with this passage as a whole? I want to hear your thoughts.
I think this paragraph, I mean, we start off with the like the old masters thing, but I think that we do kind of have a new idea, which is the idea that the design should be as clear as architecture. For me, it kind of just sort of means, I guess, like a blueprint, kind of like you said. I really liked that thought process, like a blueprint. From this sentence, we can see that the shadows kind of have this like up and down effect. And from the last sentence, we saw that, the eye was supposed to be led through dark and light. So maybe it's like the viewers are being guided by these like patterns of light and dark, right? Like one pair is up and it's like in the light, and then another one's down and it's like in the dark, which is a shadow sort of thing. That's how I'm kind of visualizing it. So I think this paragraph overall is probably like I said, that idea of being as clear as a blueprint, as clear as architecture. In terms of the main idea of the passage, I think we can agree that there was one idea that was said over and over again. And even here it says like the old masters, but it's that idea where, Cezanne wanted to make his art feel fresh by using those older techniques. So the idea we saw in paragraph 2 was repeated all throughout. And I would say that's our main idea. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree. Yeah. This idea of like, again, taking parts from what's current, right? Which is Impressionism, but then using the old ways to just spice it right up or to
Yeah.
freshen things a little bit. Um, yeah, absolutely. And I honestly feel like that came up in almost every single paragraph, except paragraph 1, which was all about stylishness, which was just like, okay,
So
now we kind
random.
of get it a little bit more, but pretty much every paragraph had some element of Cezanne mixing what's current with Impressionism and what's older, right, with the old masters. So I couldn't agree more. We had a lot of repetition in this passage. And again, you just want to find the most repeated idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be the idea from the first paragraph, as we saw in this case. It's whatever comes up the most. And I totally agree. And as far as the clear part and the architecture part from this paragraph, this feels like things that we've mentioned before, but we never had it so directly stated, right? It should be in our map. And I'm glad that we got it in here. That we need that clarity. We need those, we need the depth. That is some elements that the old masters used that Cezanne also wanted to. So I love that we included that.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we've got our main idea. We've got a solid understanding of each paragraph. It's about time for all of us to go and check out these questions. There are 5 questions with this passage, and they're really going to test your understanding of what we've talked about here today and how well and how in depth you understand of our main idea. So, we encourage all of you guys to go give those a try. There's no better time now than now, because now we understand what's going on in this passage. So you're able to really give these questions a try and see how well you can eliminate and how well you can simplify a CARS question. So lots of exciting learning opportunities on the way. And Usher, since you do so many of our daily solution videos, you teach so many courses for us, do you have any, parting advice for our students when they go to these questions or CARS questions in general?
I think, especially if you're following our strategies, one thing that's really easy to forget to do is to just remind yourself of all these ideas that you put down and to constantly kind of say them in your head. Whenever I'm going through questions for the first time, like I'm always, when I read a question, I'm automatically stopping and thinking about, what's my main, like, what does this relate to? Does it relate to a specific paragraph or the main idea? And then I'm repeating that idea in my head. And with that, I kind of will like form what I think the answer will be. that doesn't mean that you're going to see it in the answer choices, but 40-50% of the time you might see what you thought of in your head. And you don't go with that. Like on that note, like I guess second piece of advice, when you are very when you get to the answer choices and you see an answer choice that you like, you felt like it agrees, but then you're maybe between two at the end. Just go with your gut. I think that you will regret a lot, and it'll hurt you a lot if you argue against your gut and then you get it wrong versus you just go with your gut and get it wrong that way instead. Like I'd rather you go with your initial thought process and then get the wrong answer than go against whatever you're thinking in your head, go against your thought process, argue that something else is correct, talk yourself into it and then get that answer wrong because you were overthinking. I would much rather you avoid that and you just go with your gut and get the question wrong, because then you can like really understand, what was wrong about my thought process, versus if you like overthink an answer, then it's like, oh, I overthought this answer, and there's just so many other aspects that go into you getting that question wrong. It's like being unconfident in yourself. I don't know, being anxious, all of those, that sort of uh,
Yeah.
reasoning. So that's what I'd say. Yeah. Two pieces of advice, I guess. Sorry, Molly. I went a little overboard.
No, I love that. I love that. And I so agree. I think if you know what you're looking for, if you know at least what the passage has mentioned about whatever is asked about in the question, if you refresh yourself on what you know, it also frees you up, one, to embrace the confidence, which can make a huge difference in your score. But also, if you know what you're looking for, you don't have to be evaluating, well, what should I be looking for while you look at the answers. Once you
Right.
see the answers, they're going to start swaying your brain, right? The second that you start looking at them, you're going to be asking, is this the right answer? Is this the right answer? Is this the right answer? If you have some idea going in, it's going to allow you to stay focused, right? Does this answer or does this address what I thought, right? If no, completely out of left field, okay, compare it to the next one. Which one fits that idea better? If you are in a situation where you find something that sounds just like what you went through in your head, but there's an extra word or there's, a slightly stronger tone, that said, you don't want to just, oh, well, it has this word I like, it must be the right one, right? When you
Right.
already have an idea of what you're looking for, it also frees up some brain power to be very critical with the phrasing, right? That initial layer of expectation will help you or help attract your eye to particular answers, but then from there you want to use that freed up brain power to thoroughly analyze, is this statement or sentence or answer choice fair? And I love that. If you take it one step at a time, your accuracy is going to go up a lot. So, excellent pro tips. Thank you for those. I'm sure all of us listening appreciate your guidance and wisdom, Usher. We want to take a second, just thank you guys for listening. We love making these resources for you. We hope you have fun listening to them, and we hope they're helpful in your CARS journey. We'll leave it there for this episode. I'm excited for our next one. Happy studying, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day or week or evening. And we'll catch you in the next one.